Let's move on to the freedom of speech debate. Krisruby, I'd like to start with you. Ostensibly, he wants to buy Twitter because he wants to save civilization by saving free speech on one of the most important platforms in the world. Do you agree that Twitter has to be overhauled?
I agree that Twitter has to be overhauled, but I also think that there are issues around content moderation that are complicated and that nuance is really important when we're having this conversation. Too often when I hear people reporting around free speech on this, they're sort of using free speech as a blanket term without having a full understanding of what content moderation policy really looks like on the back end and how that is actually executed or implemented. To give you an example of that, last week I did a segment. My first initial impression when I was asked about Elon Musk and free speech and will he turn and save the world around, I said, sure, he can tackle free speech, but that is one of many other issues that exist. As a woman on that platform, I believe that abuse and harassment is one of the largest issues he will have to address outside of free speech. After saying that, I actually started digging into the data in the most recent Twitter transparency report. And if you look, the data supports that hypothesis that over 1 million accounts were actioned for abuse and harassment, followed by hateful conduct. Those are very large issues. And so when you put free speech in the context of hateful conduct and abuse and harassment, there's nuance involved with figuring out how to handle each of those account issues. And I'm not sure that just saying free speech without having any plan around what that means or what that looks like.
Let's try to guess what his definition might be. He says he's a free speech absolutist. Perhaps he's saying that, Twitter should mirror the law of the land. So the First Amendment, as long as you're not breaking the law in the real world, then you're not breaking Twitter's new terms of service in the virtual world. Okay, would you be happy with that?
So if I say I want to kill you on Twitter, is that breaking the law?
I don't know. Is it breaking the law if you say that to me on the street in America? It should be.
On the street? Well, this is exactly the problem.
Yeah, I think that would be threatening language, and you'd get in trouble for that on the street. You'd get in trouble for that on Twitter.
Not necessarily. Unfortunately, in an ideal world, that would be correct. I would also say the second issue that he's going to have is execution or implementation or adherence to the Digital Service Act, which is an extremely important part of this entire conversation around free speech. Because what he wants to do with free speech is directly oppositional to what the Digital Service Act in the EU is looking to execute.
Do you think that Donald Trump should be allowed back on Twitter?
I think that he should be allowed back on Twitter. I don't think that he is going to be returning to Twitter because his focus is on Truth Social. I also think the idea of who should be allowed back on Twitter is a complicated issue. Is he going to undo the trust and safety decisions that were made prior to him? One of the other things that I thought was really interesting after reviewing this transparency report is that they received the largest number of DMCA takedown notices that they have ever received in the history of doing this report since 2012. This shows me that there are a lot of legal issues that people have with defamation on social media. And child sexual exploitation, by the way, was a close second behind abuse and harassment. So there are a ton of legal issues. And I'd like to hear a plan here of how Elon Musk really wants to tackle all of these things. Free speech is a broad term, but let's really get down to the details.